YIAGA Africa says INEC missed the opportunity to rebuild trust and confidence in the electoral process. The group, however, called on the electoral body to investigate all election malpractices. And the leadership of the Labour Party backs governorship candidate Afan Achono rejects Hope Uzodinma's victory. I am Bola Oba, and this is Plus Politics. YIAGA Africa, a civil society organization, a CSO, says the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, missed an opportunity to rebuild citizens' trust in Nigeria's electoral process. On Saturday, off-season polls took place in Bayelsa, Kogi, and Imo states. Briefing journalists in Abuja on Monday, Samson Itodo, YIAGA's executive director, said, quote, "These off-cycle elections were to test the commitment of key democratic institutions such as INEC, security agencies, and the executive to restore public confidence in the electoral process," unquote. Let's take a listen, Q.
Were another missed opportunity to rebuild trust and confidence in the electoral process. The election does question the commitment of democratic institutions to electoral integrity and credible elections. As a result of the missing data from YIAGA Africa's Process and Result Verification for Transparency, PRVT, sampled polling units, coupled with the high number of critical incidents recorded in Imo, we are not in a position to verify the credibility of the process and the outcome of the Imo governorship elections. YIAGA Africa urgently calls on INEC to review and conduct a comprehensive audit of the Imo governorship election results to inspire confidence in the process and its outcome. We've called on INEC to thoroughly investigate all the allegations of malpractices, the misapplication of election laws and guidelines, and remediate all the flaws, including prosecuting its staff for complicity. In polling units where elections are cancelled or suspended, do have an opportunity to cast their vote. We also call on the National Assembly to accelerate the process of electoral reform, especially the establishment of the Electoral Offences Commission, and promptly and diligently prosecute electoral offenders. The elections in Kogi and Imo reaffirm the lack of commitment to democratic principles and credible elections on the part of electoral stakeholders. The zero-sum attitude to electoral politics undermines electoral integrity and citizens' rights to elect leaders. YIAGA Africa reiterates its earlier call that election administration requires fundamental reforms to not only inspire public confidence, but enhance the legitimacy of election processes and outcomes. This includes fundamentally reforming the election management body, in this case INEC, as well as the attitude of politicians to elections.
Joining us live is Mark Amaza, Senior Communication Manager, YIAGA Africa. Mark, good to have you on Plus Politics.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
What specifically are the issues in Imo that is making your organization to be reticent in validating what took place on Saturday?
Okay, the most significant issue in Imo is the fact that in some polling units, and as part of our sample, where we observed the elections, at least about 12% of the sample polling units, elections did not hold. As well, and we also had reports from other people where elections did not hold. Yet, we have seen results being uploaded for those polling units where elections did not hold. And that was why, this is part of the reason why we are unable to validate the results, to verify the results of the election and calling for an audit into it. We've already made a public call to INEC to look into that matter. regarding the upload of results for polling units that do not hold, because it's, it really speaks a lot, affects the credibility or integrity of those elections.
You are saying specifically that, and you are alleging or asserting that elections did not hold in 12% of the total polling units in Imo, or in 12 units. We need to get you clear.
In 12% of the polling units in our sample. Our observation doesn't cover every polling unit. It covers
in your sample.
Exactly.
And that becomes a subject of statistical argument, because your sample may be so small that the 12% of your sample may be less than 1% of the total.
Well, there's that, but it also calls, what we do is we can also extrapolate from that sample to look at how widespread the issue is. And that's the same methodology that we use to arrive at the verification of the results. Nonetheless, whether it's the percentage or not, we're still seeing results being uploaded to the IREV from those polling units where elections did not hold. And that also undermines confidence in the process.
An average watcher or an average follower of the event would think, given the margin of victory of the re-elected governor relative to the total votes or votes scored by his two major opponents, the runners-up, one would just think that, is it not somewhat superfluous that any sort of protestation, we can understand an organization like YIAGA Africa working to make sure that the integrity of our elections are solidified, but is this worth anything to the candidates who have lost?
It's not necessarily about the candidates who have lost. It's about the process being credible to inspire confidence among citizens. When we enter these elections, we are coming off the back of a diminished trust in the electoral process, and this is something we flagged in our pre-election observation reports, where citizens were not enthusiastic about the elections because they did not think it was going to be credible. That's why we believe INEC, it was an excellent opportunity for INEC to do everything it can to begin to rebuild that trust. So it doesn't matter, it's not about whether it's of interest to the parties or the candidates who lost, but it's critical that citizens see that the process is fair. So even in situations where their preferred candidates lose, they have confidence that it was a fair loss, not when there are now questions of credibility or integrity, as we have seen in some of these instances. It only further diminishes that confidence, that loss of confidence in the process.
Agreeing without conceding that the elections in Imo may have been stigmatized by some of the allegations and assertions that a credible organization and reputable organization such as yours is making. Let's now go to Kogi State. What specifically would you want to say about the Kogi's elections?
Well, for the Kogi State election results, our verification shows that the scores scored by the candidates as well as the voter turnout falls within the range that we expected or that we saw from our methodology. So so it falls within that range, so there's that accuracy. Nonetheless, we had also flagged incidences in Kogi where observers saw pre-filled result sheets in certain polling units across in certain polling units, and INEC has even responded to that and said they're going to look into it. It's also very important that despite the results falling within the ranges predicted by our PRVT methodology, it's still important for INEC to look into those issues, those incidences of pre-filled result sheets, and sanction those who were responsible for it.
If a prima facie case of a pre-filled document, vital elections management document could be found in Kogi, why would one not believe that maybe it was quite more rampant across Kogi and indeed other states where elections took place?
So we can only speak authoritatively to what our observers witnessed. We do not rely on third-hand or second-hand information. So that's why we only refer to the specific incidences witnessed by observers working at those polling units, and not from information we glean from social media or from other parties. And that's why we keep harping on those particular incidences. Like I said earlier on, even though the results fall within those ranges, that statistical ranges that we predicted based on our methodology, it's still very, very important for INEC to indicate those incidences. We are looking at how the priority should be how we rebuild trust of Nigerian citizens in the electoral process, and how we begin to sanction bad behavior and begin to cause a change in the winner all cost mentality that a lot of times politicians carry to the elections. Is not about whether those incidences can make or mar, can change the results or not.
But if you really look at the trend as it is, it's like every election is further establishing the case of voters' apathy by the voters, barring the seeming large turnout in the zone of the governor of Imo State. One would want to believe that the general turnout is still somewhat very low across all the three states. Or how would you respond to that?
Well, the turnout in Kogi was relatively impressive compared to, if you look at compared to the
percentage-wise in Kogi. What are we speaking to?
Kogi, percentage-wise, official INEC turnout is 40%. Okay. And that's way above what we have
relative to the under 30 that we had at the presidential elections and a number of the governorship and state elections in February and March. That is an uptick of a bit.
Yes, it is an uptick. It is an uptick.
Okay. The next question now would be around Bayelsa. Bayelsa came in last, I guess, because of the peculiar topography, the constraints of geography and whatever. But what is your organization's take on the Bayelsa vote?
Well, we are yet to have an official position on the Bayelsa vote, but it's also important to note that for Bayelsa, we didn't deploy process and results verification for transparency methodology, which looks at the process from polling units to collation. What we had in Bayelsa were mobile observers at collation level. So we are yet to have an official position on that, but once we do in due course, we'll let you know.
However, it does seem that when issues happen in states controlled by the national ruling party, you seem to be very quick to come out with your observations. But that's the seeming coincidence that is gelling together. But in a place like Bayelsa, you are a bit reticent. Your organization is a bit reticent to give your observation. Is that not speaking to some of the allegations that some are making that even the CSOs are in some ways tilting in the direction of partisanship?
That's not accurate. It's not accurate to say so. And I'll remind you that during the governorship elections, we deployed this same methodology in 3 states, in Kano, in Delta, and in Benue. Of those 3 states, only one was being controlled by the national ruling party. So it's to say we only rush to give statements where the ruling party is one in control is not accurate. But like I said,
No. I'm not speaking. I'm not speaking about deployment.
I understand. But
I'm only speaking about the coincidence. To any.
It's a coincidence, quite all right. But I don't. Like I said, the result for Bielsa came out not too long ago, and because of the difference in methodology is the reason why we do not have a statement for Bielsa yet. If we had deployed the same methodology for Bielsa, or we had polling unit observers all the way, we'll have accurate information from that level all the way up. But if you look at even our statement,
okay. On your behalf, let me tell the mischief makers and thinkers that YIAGA Africa is not anti the ruling party.
No, we have never been partisan, and we will never be partisan.
I never said so. I was just also quoting some mischief.
I'm hoping that mischief makers are watching this so that they will hear
No, they always follow you, because at the end of the day, they know that YIAGA is the gold standard in election monitoring and observation. But having said that, your general take of 2 out of the 3 governorship elections on Saturday, that's your organizations, is somewhat a bit disappointing. Because you must also be using this kind of opportunity to speak to solutions. What are the specific recommendations that we should be looking at now? Because some of us, for more than well over a decade, some of us have actually believed in technology, but we seem now to be having a short-circuit system that is almost rubbishing technology. If somebody could, like in Kogi, could have a pre-filled Form EC8, that rubbishes the importance, effectiveness of technology. What are the recommendations that an organization such as yours would want to be recommending now?
So regarding technology, I'll build upon the recommendations we made after the general elections in our report that we released in July. First, technology is not a silver bullet. It works in many ways. We saw how Beavers worked with accreditation in the general elections and in this cycle, but it's not a silver bullet. In the end, it requires humans to make it work. And that's where oftentimes we see that reforms that we push fall apart, where stakeholders, whether it's INEC, whether it's political parties and candidates, fail to follow through in playing their own role in implementing those reforms. With regards to this election in particular, a lot of our recommendations have been around the need for the police and for INEC to prosecute persons within their employ that tamper the process, whether it's police officials, whether it's security agents, to prosecute them. We also call for more electoral reform, especially the missed opportunity we had with the last assembly in setting up a national electoral offices commission, because there's this electoral offices happen with almost every electoral cycle, and often only a very small percentage of electoral offenders are prosecuted. The police is supposed to take a lead role on that, but has often not done it. And the INEC is not a prosecutorial agency. There's a need for a purpose-built agency that will lead on the prosecution of those who commit electoral offenses and those who benefit from those electoral offenses that are being committed. Of course, there's also need for more reforms in terms of, we're seeing, even with regards to technology, we need to make it mandatory that results are being transmitted electronically from the polling unit. So the promise that INEC made with the presidential elections, and it failed. We've seen improvement in that regard this time around, but it shouldn't be left at INEC's discretion. We need to see more reform in terms of, how officials of INEC are being appointed. Those appointments should not be made by a president who is partisan, or has interest in the election, as should be. Or, we can't take away a president being a politician, but we need to have those officials, whether it's the INEC chairman, whether it's national commissioners, whether it's resident electoral commissioners, appointed by independent body, so that we do not have this incidence of persons who are partisan being appointed into such a sensitive position. So those are specific recommendations we've been making. We made from the general elections, and we're making again with this election. as we enter a new cycle of reforms, which should start very soon with honestly, so that those are passed and we begin to test those reforms with other off-cycle elections until we get to the next general elections in 2027.
In so much as these recommendations are quite exciting to somebody like me, I'm seeing a number of lacunae in this recommendation. For me, the major villain of the Nigerian electoral value chain are are members of the political class. And added to that will be poverty. The young person allegedly found with 1 million naira NYC, the young copper, allegedly found with 1 million naira and a pre-filled form, tempted enough in today's Nigeria by a very dubious and villainous politician. A certain percentage of people of that chap's or that person's class may fall. That's number one. Number two is technology can never be totally useless, because come to think of it, the allegations made in Imo that the beavers was bypassed and results have been declared, and some results are not quite consistent with the number of registered voters in polling at the polling units where they've been declared. Ultimately, technology should help if our judiciary, as our judicial officers, if they want to be conscientious. But I'm sitting there now thinking, you really need, organizations such as yours need to be speaking much more vociferously to some recommendations that will be directly targeted at the politicians to have a change of habit. What do you think about that?
I agree with you that there's a lot of work that needs to be done with our politicians, and we mentioned that again and again, even with our statement that we released today. The zero-sum attitude to elections, where win at all costs, is fundamentally at the heart of our troubles with politicians in this country, where they look for loopholes, how to bypass laws and whatnot. And that is a serious issue that needs a lot of change and reform. And that's one of the things I was trying to address when in the last Electoral Act amendments, where you had laws around how candidates are being nominated to able to reduce that desperation from that level that ends up harming the process of the elections itself. But beyond that, it's another thing to look at is, one thing that our politicians often miss is the biggest way to convince people to vote for you and for you to win power is by delivering on your promise of good governance. And in absence of that, you now see all of this antics that's being done again and again. Nonetheless, we will keep speaking to that, and also, as like I said earlier on, as we begin to have these conversations around electoral reform, there needs to be a lot of talk around seeing how the laws can be done, whether it's to reforming INEC and to change the attitude of politicians. And that's why it's very important that also those who commit electoral offenses for politicians and the politicians themselves need to be given met with the consequence of their action, so as to send a very strong message to these politicians.
Mark, that's a very good place to leave it. We should be having you soon, because we need to speak to some of these other ideas that we've seen work in other liberal democracies. But in so much as politicians make the much they make in Nigeria, I wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll go on a short break, and when we're back, we'll take the second segment of the show.